Committee meeting to order. Can I get a roll call, please, Kathy?
Mayor Cowie.
Here.
Chairman Grumhouse.
Here.
Alderman Novit.
Here.
Alderman Woodman. Alderman Moore.
Here.
Alderman Morsch.
Here.
Alderman Schoenheider.
Here.
Alderman Luby.
Here.
Alderman Palmer. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. First item on the agenda, consideration of the minutes from the Finance Committee meeting held on March 21st, 2011, our 4-hour marathon. Any comments or edits to the minutes? Not, I'll take a motion.
They were well done, and I move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is consideration of an ordinance approving a fee schedule for the city of Lake Forest. I believe Fire Chief Jeff Howell is going to come up and take us through this.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance Committee. This is a follow-up presentation from last month's Finance meeting, and it's a little bit different perspective. There's a couple questions that were asked in that meeting, and I'd like to answer those for you. The first one, is there a cap on EMS calls? The answer from the research that we have done is no, there's no industry cap, and there are various reasons for that, one of which is obviously individual insurance that residents have. They have all kinds of different ranges of that insurance, and it also is determined, for an example, if a person is in a traumatic car accident and they needed to be aerovac'd out, that's a whole different expense that could be anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000. So there's different determinations that are made by the insurance companies as far as that there is no cap. In addition to that, are any other communities that are out there that are looking at increasing the rates? The answer is yes. For an example, just from our last meeting last month, through Andres, who does our billing, there's 144 agencies that contract through Andres, and they're only one of several agencies throughout the state. There were 12 departments that contacted them that have increased their rates in the last month, and they were contacted by several others stating that they will increase their rates sometime this year. And then an additional question is, can we show a breakout of the percentage of calls in the respective categories? Now, this pie chart's a little bit different from the last month. What I had done last month is I did a breakout strictly of resident EMS calls. There are also non-resident calls. This is still excluding Lake Bluff and Knollwood, but it's now encompassing both resident and non-resident calls for ALS, ALS2, and BLS. Brief explanation on BLS, basic life support. It's someone that maybe is riding their bike, they fall, they break their leg, they need a splint, we transport them to the hospital. ALS would be broken out. It's a little more in-depth. It could be to the extreme of IV is started, cardiac monitor, and potentially one drug would be administered. In addition to that, if you move up to an ALS2, the criteria dramatically changes, and you'll see later in the presentation, you really don't have a lot of these calls, but it would be IV monitor, up to 3 drugs or more administered, could be cardioversion, cardiac pacing, interosseous, different types of medical procedures that are pretty invasive. So that's a breakout as far as those calls. That was as of February to date, the 726 calls that we had. That's a little more in depth. Breakout of all the calls percentage-wise. And please stop me if I do go too fast. Now, this is the one that's a little bit different from what you had seen originally. When I did the first presentation, we broke out and we said roughly 61% of the calls were Medicare and 37% were non-Medicare, and then 2% were uninsured. This is all-encompassing. Again, this is taking also the non-resident calls that take place in the city of Lake Forest. That's just a more in-depth percentage, how they're broken out. And here's roughly a 3-year average. And again, this is to date. These were calls that were billed up to February 28th of this year in the top column there, 726 calls. And you can see, once you include the resident and non-resident for Lake Forest, it's almost a 50-50 split throughout the 3-year average. Here's a little more of a detailed breakout. The left column is the average per call that the 144 agencies are charging. The middle column is what Lake Forest is currently charging, and there's the difference in the right column. Now, if you were to take all of those calls and break them out equal percentage, you would see it's almost pretty much a wash. It's about a $37 difference on those calls. So option one is to raise our annual ALS, BLS rates to the average charge rate by the surrounding communities. And option two is to take the ALS, BLS rates to the average charged by the surrounding municipalities and recover an additional $100 per call. Option one, a little more detail. If you were to break out the charges, on the far right column in the green, you would see the difference that you would equate to, depending on those calls, if they were averaged out equally, which obviously they're not, as you saw earlier in the pie charts. That's how it would break out, though. And the recovery for option one, now this is FY11 data up until February 28th. So if we were to do the calculations, this is what you would recover for those calls based on the type of calls that we experienced. Since that date, which we don't have those calls officially billed yet, obviously there's 2 more months. We've had another 164 calls to date on top of that number that haven't been billed. So it's 40,138.82. Option two, on the far right column, there you see what the changes would be from the proposed. What the recommendation from the finance department was, on the particular calls that we were high, we were gonna leave them alone. On the calls that were low, we were gonna bring them up to the average rate and then increase at the 100 per call. And the reason for not changing that is if you look at that non-resident ALS2, there's really hardly any calls. I think it's like 0.1% is what that call would be when it equates out. Here's the recovery for option two. The resident ALS, for example, 67,119 for a total of 112,738. If you were to take that and do a rough guesstimate of the additional calls throughout the rest of the year, it would come out to be about 135,000.
Those non-resident, those are Lake Bluff, a lot of them?
No, that's, Lake Bluff and Knollwood are completely excluded from this. It's a totally separate billing.
So
This
those
is
are just
strictly,
people in Lake Forest that are non-residents?
exactly, passerbys, contractors,
So the
visitors.
ALS2, the one probably might have been on 41 or something, an accident?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm just
possibly,
saying,
sure.
somebody passing through.
Right.
that-
Right.
Okay.
Right. And there you have it. Do you have any questions for me? Staff is recommending that you grant first reading in this evening's city council meeting.
Chief, can you remind me again what Lake Bluff is doing here?
Lake Bluff has changed their ordinance, and what they have basically done is they have taken an average of what they have paid to Lake Forest over the past 10 years. In addition to that, they have increased their rate $1,335 to equate to the fully loaded cost of $1,868 for a cost recovery, which is basically what this concept is all about. If you look at every time the department rolls out, obviously there's a cost to that, and we're simply trying to recover some of those costs from a user fee standpoint.
Because we're significantly under recovering the full
Correct.
amount of costs.
That is
we
correct.
have to
Even
pay.
if you were to go to the recommendation from staff, you are still well below what it costs for an average transport.
Supplies those are billed through the hospital,
Correct.
so that it doesn't count any supplies, right?
Yeah, completely separate charge.
And, you know, one of the things we've been watching is what the average billing is, and, you know, based on our conversations, it sounds like that amount has been going up rapidly, that some communities have already moved, but we're sort of in a cycle here where a lot of people are making their rates up further.
Yes, sir. In fact, what's happening is the rates are changing twice a year by different city governments. And the reason for that is Medicare puts out their rates in December of every year. And obviously, agencies have different fiscal years. So whether it's January or May, that's going to determine when they're going to change their rates. So it's really changing twice a year.
But if we go $100 above the average, there's a good chance that by the time we look at this next year,
It will have changed again.
we may be the average, that may be the average.
Correct.
At the way things have been moving.
Yes, sir.
right? I mean, even in the last month or two, you said things have the average has moved up quite a bit, right?
Yes, from the agencies that we know of that are through Andre's medical billing, there's an additional 12 that have already changed, and several more are indicating that they will. An additional study that I received from the Naperville area, they also stated that a majority of those departments, which I think there was about 117, and they have different billing agencies, but they are also looking at increasing their rates.
Where's the big increase? I mean, where's the increased cost coming from? Is it overhead, capital, expendables? I mean, why does it cost so much to pick someone up, and why do the costs increase every year?
Well, I think the simplest way to look at that is the way that we break out the fee structure from a cost per call. If you look at the department's overall budget via salaries, pensions, all of those components, and then break it out based on the annual calls per year, we roughly come out to about $1,868 per call. So every time they roll out the building, that's a generic number of what it costs.
And that number's just been higher, or that number's increasing?
Well, certainly it would increase as the budget increases annually, yes.
Salaries and benefits?
Yeah,
It's mostly labor, mostly salaries and benefits?
right.
As far as billings for the past year, how successful has the city been? There's always a percentage where you just never get paid.
Oh, sure.
What percentage is going unpaid, and how aggressive are we as far as collection?
I think we're one of the better ones. When you look at a lot of the agencies, there's about a 63% recovery rate. Lake Forest has an 86% recovery rate. And then the individuals, the uninsured, that 2%, they go to a collection agency. And to date, that was billed about $59,000, and we've recovered about $6,600.
Okay. Is there any loss between the amount that's actually covered by insurance and citizens paying overage, or is it 100% payable, or?
Yes, if you remember from last month's presentation, there's your Medicare. So Medicare has their cap, and let's say, I'll go back to one of these as an example. If you look at the top one, the resident ALS, the current, the 417.30, that's a Medicare rate.
Okay.
So Medicare, technically, they only cover 80% of that, anticipating that an individual is going to have a supplemental insurance, and they will pick up the additional 20%. So we're not even really discussing the Medicare from the proposal of staff. We're talking about the other percentage of individuals that have the normal medical insurance that has no cap, and it's just applied to from the ambulance call.
Okay. So, yeah, roughly just on a flat percentage, how much are we losing on collection? Just curiosity.
Well, quite a bit.
Okay.
You know, I couldn't give you an actual number, but I would say it's hundreds of thousands.
Okay, but percentage-wise, 20%, 30%?
I would say
Estimate.
more like 55, 60.
Okay, so our collection practices could be tightened up also.
Right.
Okay.
Although a lot of the collection is just the uninsured who can't pay it, right?
Well, that's the
And
2%.
and the supplemental.
Yeah, the supplemental falls under, again, Medicare, that's the 20%. The normal insured, which if you were to go back to this particular slide where you show the resident and the non-resident, but they're within Lake Forest, you're talking about the 48% private insured. That's what you're talking about, actually increasing the rate on.
Okay.
Do you have information on what the other communities are what it costs the other communities to make a call? We're at 1860. Are the communities that you polled, are they?
It would also depend on what their annual budget is. Some departments, obviously bigger communities, bigger demographics. Community like Naperville, their budget's quite a bit more. Libertyville.
I mean, the
for
cost
example.
per call.
We've done that kind of work
Yeah.
actually with the chief on a number of benchmarks, but it's hard to isolate specific personnel.
Sure.
Because we have people doing dual duties and things, but we've gone through a pretty extensive exercise, and the chief has a benchmarking the performance and our cost against other departments, and I think we're doing very well in that regard. And I think we're continuing to operate overall as a department under what most of the other benchmarks that we looked at are. So I'm pretty confident that he's got his finger on that one. Pretty good.
Sure.
Is that an accurate way of describing it?
Absolutely, yes.
Chief, okay.
Mhm.
So we meet and go over the budget, and we ask those same kinds of questions and say, how is that, how do we compare to other communities? And, you know, it's a little difficult because it's apples, oranges, and grapefruits.
But when do we do that? Just,
We do that through, he does that through the budget process every year. And
I think the question would be, to make it simple, is do our ambulances do what would be considered the average number of calls? Or are we higher or lower, looking at our population? I mean, you know, the price would come down if we had more calls. If we had a lot less calls, the price per call would go up, because we're paying the guys to sit in the
It's
house.
fixed price.
Yeah, I mean, they're there, we're paying for the truck.
that was the purpose for my question,
Right.
actually.
So it comes down, our ambulance calls, is that about average for an ambulance crew? About.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
you
know,
know, down in the city, I know it's gonna be a little bit.
They're also cross-trained, obviously, so they do
Right.
EMS and fire. They're trained as paramedics. They're
Right.
also trained as specialized response
But just
team
looking at the
members.
ambulance going out, we do kind of a comparable with most communities, or we're safer here?
I think your paramedics do an excellent job.
Well, I don't
really
mean, I
do.
don't mean on the quality of what they're doing, I'm just saying on the number of calls that they get out.
Well, again, as far as annually,
mean, we're looking at
we're running
3
at,
or
you know,
4
the
a
calls
day.
increase every year.
Yeah.
I think last year we had roughly 3,100 calls. They've been kind of split, 50-50 on the percentage of calls between, you gotta also understand that this is just for Lake Forest, but we do provide EMS service for
Right.
Lake Bluff and
Right.
Nolan.
Right, so we're running at maximum capacity for a truck and a
They're,
crew.
they're averaging almost 10 calls a day.
Okay. They're busy.
So we should have a very low number compared to other communities, if we're busy.
10 calls is pretty good.
That's, yeah, pretty good
Pretty
amount of
busy.
calls.
Not a lot of sitting time with that.
Not when they're training and doing all the.
I don't mean
That's
to,
what I mean.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
Sure.
is that the report that Alderman Morse spoke of? Is that available for me to get a copy of? What the other communities charge for, I mean,
think I
what it
actually
costs
could
the
find
fire
They
departments?
actually had a newspaper article where they did a study on it in the past 6-8 months. I will see if I can track
The
it.
part that, the budget part, if we could,
As far as our annual budget and how we allocate it, a lot of that's indicated under performance measurements.
I meant with other departments. My question is, how do we compare in cost of calls? And Alderman Marsh indicated there's a report that shows that compared to other communities.
Not
Is that-
cost of calls. I think what I was trying to explain is that, as the chief just indicated, we have people that are cross-trained doing multiple duties.
I understand there would be things affecting the cost per call. That wasn't my question. It was more, if we're at $1,860 per ambulance call, what is Highland Park? What is Naperville? What is, just wanted, how they calculate it.
A suggestion maybe, and chief, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, if we want to look at an overall department budget as per citizen
This is- no, no,
or
this is
per
just-
other metric,
This is for the ordinance that we're talking about today.
But it all blends, you know, you're making a cut of how much fixed cost to allocate when you have the two guys there who are covering fire calls and also covering EMS.
right?
Right.
So, you know, the 1868 is not a variable cost, right? It's the total fixed cost
Right.
of what we attribute to ambulances divided by the number of trips we go out.
Right.
So, you know,
And other fire departments make the same assumption.
they may or may not.
They may or may not.
It's gonna depend on what their salary level is, what their costs of operation are.
Absolutely. So what's the numbers? Do we know the numbers?
Well, they're gonna be somewhat in comparison where our,
Well, that's what I'd like,
What-
that's
what
what
we're-
I'm hoping for.
the trucks are the same cost to buy.
I mean, if I can't get it,
Operating
it's
costs.
okay. I just want to know, has
I
it
don't-
been looked at? I mean, do we know our 1868, what's Highland Parks?
Well, I think going back.
We look at enough, eventually they make sense. I
No, I
understand.
think, David, I don't think anybody's trying to be evasive. I think that to look at it that level of detail, we're trying to suggest that perhaps a better measurement might be overall department budget because of the cross-training and multiple duties that people perform.
With all
Against-
due
again-
respect, I just think differently, and I was
Okay, no,
hoping
no,
for a
I-
different number to look at, because,
Okay.
and clearly,
Go ahead
if
with
it were
your
a
question.
competition, fire departments could allocate less overhead to their thing, but if there's a number that works out there, we throw the number 1868 out. I just want to know if that's a high or low number, assuming that fire departments calculate it in similar ways, and that,
Well, I think what we can do is we can pull together some numbers for you. I'm not sure we'll be comparing apples and oranges because part of that 1868 was a number that was prepared for our contract with the Village of Lake Bluff. Most communities don't have to worry about that because they're not contracting out, but I think what we can do is take total budget, take personnel, take calls, take population, and then you can just sort of get a benchmark based on those other metrics.
Yeah, it's more of something to frame whether this is reasonable or not. I mean, this approach is, I agree with it, but maybe we should be charging $400 more. I mean, I don't know. I mean, how could you know without having more?
Well, part of the conversation, it's a policy issue, is really to what extent do you want to recover your costs? Because there's, I'm sure, very few departments out there that recover their costs through fees of this type. So it's just a matter of you charge more, you charge less, and then the property tax has to pick up the balance.
And how comfortable are you with the increase year over year? Because obviously this is a pretty substantial increase. You know, we had talked about maybe doing a $250 increase, and one of the reasons I and Tom Morris, who was involved in the call, backed off that was that we thought that was too big of an increase for this year. And the other thing is, the Lake Bluff contract expires at the end of this year, and we don't know what that's going to look like. And obviously, depending what happens with that contract, these fees may need to be adjusted again. So, you know, there's going to be another decision to be made in 12 months when this comes up next year.
Right. We'll get you some numbers.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We're gonna have this on first reading in the council meeting, but we'd like to get approval of the fee here, and this is for $100 per transport. This is to raise the average charge by surrounding municipalities, the numbers we saw up there, plus an additional $100 per transport. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you, Chief. Next item is consideration of an ordinance making a supplemental appropriation for the fiscal year beginning May 1st, 2010 and ending April 30th, 2011. Kathy, I think you have this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As advised by the city attorney, we come to you annually for a supplemental appropriation at the end of each fiscal year for any fund that exceeds the original appropriation. This year, we have 3 funds that are exceeding their original appropriation. The first is the Emergency Telephone Fund. We're seeking a $20,000 supplemental appropriation for unforeseen equipment and contractual service expenses for the New World software implementation. There is revenue available in the 911 fund to cover that. The second is the Iowa Farm Fund for garden market operation expense. The garden and market were originally part of the foundation. It was transferred to the city, and then it was transferred back. So this does not involve any city money. It's just a accounting issue where we are returning the garden market expense revenues back to the foundation. That is for $82,000. And the last is the Route 60 Intersection Fund. This is a refund to the Conway Park for the Route 60 Field Drive intersection. The original money was received in fiscal '08. At that time, it was expected for all of it to be used, but due to the diligence of our engineering department, the project did come in lower, so we have refunded $375,000. We would need a supplemental appropriation for that amount. Are there any questions?
I just had the one question on the Route 60. That money will go back and be divided up, but was there any thought of that to using that fund for a maintenance for that area there, or we couldn't do that? You know, we talk about.
Yes, I'm asking Ramesh if that was discussed.
Or Ken? Do you have it back there?
No, those funds were supposed to be used for the intersectional.
For just the intersection, okay.
Right.
Good, thank you. I'll make a motion on all 3 for acceptance.
Did you second, I'm sorry? Or do
You
have a
don't know,
question?
I was.
Go ahead.
Small question, what premium do we pay for the push-button talk? I had notes and I can't find anything tonight, sorry. You know, one of the specifications eliminated other cell phone carriers, was they didn't have the push-button. The push-to-talk. And the cell phone bill, I just want to know, is part of the reason for going over on the communications, am I in the right category on this? Is
No,
this part
that's
of
on
the-
the, that's on the regular agenda.
That's in a different.
That's on a regular agenda,
Right.
I'm sorry. I was digging around for it, I thought this was part of it.
Okay.
Sorry. Second?
I have a motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is other business. We had a flash report in the packet. You know, we remain comfortably ahead of budget, a little less than where we were in February, largely to utility taxes. Didn't have a good utility tax month in February, I guess, low gas prices, and we certainly couldn't blame it on the cold weather. It was plenty cold, but I'm guessing it was just bad estimates by the chairman on the gas prices. Any other questions on this, though? I mean, we're obviously tracking in good shape here.
No, I'm thrilled to see it tracking in the positive.
Good. Why don't we take the opportunity for the public to address the Finance Committee? And then maybe we'll try and hammer some other stuff out from the regular meeting if we have time. Let's do that first. Anyone have any public here who want to address the Finance Committee? Hearing no one. Why don't we move on and take some stuff off the, that we're going to talk about at the council meeting? Does Ramesh want to go first here?
Let's do the road, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman, Mayor, members of the Finance Committee. Every year, we come before you to, as part of our annual resurfacing program. You know, we do have, every 5 years, we conduct testing on all our streets, and we come up with a 5-year list of streets, and based on the budget we have, we resurface certain amount of streets. This year, the program is a little different, that we are trying to combine forces with Lincolnshire and Highland Park to get these economies of scale and do a much large-scale project, but also see if there is a pricing benefit in doing that. At the February 22nd council meeting, we came to the council to get a appropriation for IDOT for MFT funds on this project. We did get that. So this year, we did open the bids, and then we received 4 bids, and the bids were a little different. We had the base bid, and we had a addendum number 1, like the alternate bid 1. On the base bid, as you can see, the addendum number 1 was only Highland Park only. They had some additional streets to be done at the later point, and they added those addendum number 1. So we took the base bid and the addendum number bid, and we combined those two to come up with our lowest responsible bidder. Looking at the bids we got Peter Baker, slightly under Curran, and then Johnson, and then ALM. One quick thing to look at it, like we were always looking at the comparison of how we did last year and the year before. In the memo, I quickly put down on what we did on the surface prices. As we can see, last year we paid close to like $72 a ton on the surface. This year we got around 65. If you do the same thing for the binder course, which is the course underneath the surface layer, last year we paid around $66 a ton, and this year we got at $60 a ton. So can this be attributed to the economy? Yes. Having said that, we just opened up our bids for the Deer Path parking lot resurfacing last week. Those prices were around 72, so $72 a ton for the surface. So we do realize that the economies of scale are the more the quantities, the contractor did give us a good price on that aspect of it in terms of just looking at that. So today we are recommending award of the contract. I think with the prices we got, we did receive, I just want to mention about the Oak Knoll Drive. Oak Knoll Drive was scheduled to be resurfaced next year. Looking at the prices we got, to take advantage of such low prices, we are recommending adding Oak Knoll Drive from Everett to the north end to this program, so that we are still within our budget and also take advantage of these prices. Highland Park did award the contract to Baker at the last Monday council meeting. We are scheduled for tonight, and then Lincolnshire is scheduled next Monday. Once we award the contract, we send the contracts back to IDOT, because again, this is MFT funds. Once we get those approved, we are looking at mid-May construction start, and we're trying to wrap the entire thing by end of October. So we are recommending to Baker.
I had one question for you, Ramesh. I understand why, even though in the base bid, Kern was below Baker, why we're going with Baker because of the addendum. What I don't really understand is when I look at Lake Forest's share of the base bid, obviously Baker's about 15,000 higher
Right.
there. So when they bid, they actually bid the three communities separately, even though they lump it all together?
Right, when we put our bid package, they had to bid on the total quantities, but we did give them breakdown of all the three communities. So we gave them the breakdown of Highland Park, Lake Forest, and Lincolnshire, but the prices they bid were on the total quantities. So they knew beforehand what quantities belong to which community.
Okay. Because I guess the only thing that I worry about in doing it this way, and you know, they're not dramatically different here, but someone could have the low bid and favor one community greatly over another community, and then there's really nothing the other community or communities could do about it.
Right, I think that's a true statement, but if you look at the totality of the savings, right, if you look at the savings overall, I agree, like, you know, current was 15,000 lower, but if you look at the overall compared to, again, we're trying to compare to the last year's prices.
Right.
Current prices on the same, those two items were around, Baker was around 60, Current was around 63 for binder, and then Baker was 64, Current was around 66. So if you just look, pay items or the schedule items for those two quantities, they were a little higher, but again, if you look at the totality of it,
Right.
we do come up.
I guess I'm just wondering why we wouldn't have sort of a formula that said, here's the total amount of roads that each community is bidding, and the formula is going to be, you know, your proportionate share of the miles. Now, maybe someone will say, Lake Forest is a lot stricter, their roads are in the downtown, it's more difficult, I don't know. And maybe, you know, maybe this isn't anything to worry about. Tom, you bid a lot of these things, I don't know if you have any views on this, but.
Well, I guess I'm going to go back to my first comment when this came up 2 months ago and said, can we get out of it? So that's question number one.
Yeah, if we get out of it, then we have just rebid the whole thing.
Okay.
The Allen Park and.
Secondly, we are paying the difference in price out of our budget and our estimate to pay for the addendum for Highland Park. That's troublesome to me. Just the principle is troublesome. That we're gonna accept a bid that will cost us more money because of an addendum for work in Highland Park. And almost the difference between what we're gonna pay more under this, is gonna go to, frankly, subsidize the addendum in Highland Park. Okay, so that's a matter of principle, it's not a matter of the.
That's true, but we're paying
Procedure?
15 and they're paying 280.
Right.
I mean, we are
Right.
subsidizing them a little bit, but they're
Yeah,
still,
no, I mean, it's the difference between, we're subsidizing the bulk of that because we're paying more under to accept this other.
well, but it's not the
This
bulk of
bid.
it, right? Highland
But-
Park's paying additional
Right, they're
295,000.
paying additional.
No, I understand that. But had that addendum in the work in Highland Park not been there, our price would have been lower.
Right, and so did
That's all
Highland.
I'm saying.
Sure.
That's just a matter of principle that I'm having a trouble with.
Right, and-
So that does concern me. The other thing that concerned me about your comments, and maybe you have a very good answer for this, I'm sure you do, but the only way that we're gonna benchmark this has nothing to do with last year or the year before's cost. Because as you know, this is a very, very dynamic marketplace.
Right.
And it is absolutely absolutely based on contracts, geography, location, and the market.
right,
And so in order to compare this, to show if we are getting benefits out of this, we would have to see I would have to see a series of $1.5 million bids or thereabouts, $1.5 million to $2 million bids right now for pavement resurfacing in this region. Be the only way we can say we're saving based on this kind of model. We cannot look at last year and say we're saving. That's not,
right,
But
no.
we did look at Deer
Yeah, we
Path's
just looked
pool.
at Deer
yeah,
Path,
but
which
that's
is,
not even of the scale.
half a mil-
That's
right.
not even of the scale we're talking about. That's of a.
it's a half a
It's a
million.
lot different when you have a $100,000 parking lot versus $1.5 million.
It's a half a million though, still.
It's much different, it's very different work. It's not the same kind of work.
Right, no, I
It's not
agree.
the same kind of work, and Ramesh knows that.
Right, but in the overall, but I think it's still the economies of scale does play a role, you know, there's, I totally agree,
Right.
Alderman Morse, I don't.
No, I mean,
But
we
we can
just
get-
don't know what it is.
Sure, we can get you the prices, and I think Glenview and Northbrook, I think they went combined, they did bid together, so I can get you those prices.
That'd be great.
Sure,
Maybe that'll help.
yeah,
Out of curiosity, how long is it gonna take to get the bid on Oak Knoll?
it's part of the,
Okay.
right.
Yeah, I'm just trying to say as far as,
We're doing Oak Knoll on the same price that
Same
they
price.
gave us.
okay.
Yeah,
then-
same.
We're adding it in.
But I can get you that, I know
Okay.
Glenview, Northbrook, they
So
went
me,
together.
for at the end of the day, I raised this question before we went out to bid. I felt that it would raise more questions, that it would solve answers, and I still feel that way. So that's just me, I'm only one person, I just wanted to
No,
express
no,
my
no,
position
don't-
that I feel better off doing this by ourselves, and
Having said
No.
that, we probably got a better bid, right?
Right,
I can't say that based on the data I have in front of me. No, I can't go that far.
but I mean, okay, I agree, if you're looking for a $3 million contract, then, you know, you can compare apples to apples, but we just opened the other bids, and these prices were lower. Having said that, we'll get you the Glenview, Northbrook, so that at least you have that.
That would help.
Sure. I'll get you.
I know you will, Ramesh.
Other questions on this?
The only thing I would add, though, and we'll try and get you the financial information, because I understand we're giving you what we've got, but
Right.
once we find out what other communities can do. But this is only one component of a lot of capital improvement projects that we will be doing in this consortium. We were just talking earlier tonight about concrete streets. We don't have a lot of them. Highland Park has a lot more, and some of the other communities do. So by piggybacking on them, we're gonna benefit to that extent. So I guess the problem's gonna be if you wanna just cherry pick, then the consortium may start to fall apart because everybody will just do their own thing.
Yeah, again, my experience, and maybe mine is limited, and I don't wanna bash engineers, but this is kind of like,
You won't be the first.
this is kind of what engineers come up with, you know, and it's great, but to play it out in real business and to make it happen, an asphalt guy is running a crew in a truck full of asphalt from a very specific location that has a cost of that crew, that truck, and the distance it goes. And we've got Peter Baker and Sons right over here on 176, and we got Curran, where's he at?
Which is just north of 140.
Just north.
Right.
So that's where that asphalt's coming for these other jobs, and they gotta go farther to Highland Park, and they gotta go farther to Lincolnshire than they do to here.
Sure.
And the business would suggest to me, we can do pretty good by ourselves. That's just from a business standpoint.
And
And Jim, I think you would,
Jim, what do you?
you would, can weigh in on this kind of topic.
You know, I'm gonna give the answer that Vic Filippini always gives.
Okay.
I don't have enough in front
Yeah,
of me.
we've insulted the engineers and the lawyers.
There we go. We might as well include them all now, right? No, it depends. I mean, it's gonna come down to the fact it's a competitive bid, and a lot of it, Tom, is the fact is timing. As you know, a lot of it comes down to what job a contractor has at what point in time, if he's locked into one and not another, how many crews he has. I mean, there's so many factors. I can tell you, I've built miles and miles of roads from everything except supplying the asphalt, and you know,
Me too.
the variables are so intricate that I would hate to say I could tell you what the outcome's gonna be. The only way you'll know what the outcome's gonna be is if you put it out to bid and ask for another bid.
Right.
I don't know if, you know, that may get us to where you wanna go, but of course, Bob's comment is, are we then corrupting the process of the consortium? You know, that's a good point, that does our good faith then go away at some point here? I think you have to weigh that as well.
Anytime I see $1,100 difference in a base bid on a $3 million base, then I ask a question.
And I'm going to ask another question very quickly, because before I was told, according to the information I have, as far as Oak Knoll, we really don't have a bid from Baker, at least from what I'm seeing. It's just, and our your
Right,
estimate of
right.
what the cost base would
Oak
be.
Knoll is just the quantities, right? We have a quantities for the street, so
Right.
based on the quantities.
But
you
we
can-
don't have a commitment from Baker to say specifically that the road's gonna cost 151. We're guessing, and it has to go out to
The
bid.
bid is actually based on
Quantity.
the unit cost.
Right.
Okay.
And the quantities in the bid are all estimates. We have the ability to jockey those quantities, and that's the point that Ramesh is making, that we're just, in order to make that determination of Oak Knoll, we're taking the quantities, costs, and
Okay.
adding the amount that we need to come up with that.
I just want to make sure, though, because on the initial estimate from Baker, it was based on a lesser quantity. If we increase it, is it a guaranteed price for Oak Knoll? Or
The
could
the
they?
contract is all based on estimated
Estimate
quantities.
quantity.
They actually charge us based on actual. They're bidding the unit cost.
Right.
Okay, and what I'm getting at is, and mention was made of this before, for the addendum bid, is the addendum bid consistent with that cost per for the Barberry project in Highland Park? Basically, could they knock down the price for the Oak Knoll addition?
I think they have to base it on, it's unit price bid, so like, let's say, we specify 10 streets, and then we get a certain unit price. We estimate based on a certain unit price. Prices do come lower, so we add few more streets. I understand what you're saying. I think you're saying if Baker is willing to take this extra work of this Oak Knoll, based on again, these are all estimates.
Yeah.
Because the final price, by the end of the job, we may not be able to do all the unit quantities we specified, because those are all based on estimate, and sometimes they do go over, sometimes they do come lower. So as long as they're within our policy is like more than 50%. If the quantities exceed 50% or more, then you got to rebid. So typically the contractors are okay within like 10 to 20%, they're okay, typical. And IDOT doesn't allow us to go, because these are MFT funds, we don't want to go more than 20% per quantity.
Okay.
So, based what we have seen, this is a minor quantity, 151,000 compared to 1.6, so they should be okay.
Okay.
Can I ask one more question, Ramesh? You're comfortable with this?
Yeah, I
Good.
think,
Then I'm comfortable.
No, we are
Okay,
comfortable.
Ramesh? No, Ramesh?
All
Ramesh,
we are
I only
saying-
asked you one question, answer.
You'll
it,
never
I
hear,
think-
you'll never hear that again,
I
so
think
just
I'm
step away
comfortable.
from the podium.
I'm comfortable.
yes, we are.
Back up, just stand away.
Thank you, Ramesh.
Thank you for your very thorough answers.
Do we want to do a couple trucks?
We love trucks.
That I am.
Is there a page missing? There's another bidder on this one, right, Michael? Somewhere?
I do not believe the page is. Okay. Advantage.
Mauritius
Got it.
ornery, is he?
I'm just teeing you up with, so you
Thank
can
you.
address that before.
Okay,
they ask it.
we will. Mr. Chairman, honorable mayor, members of the Finance Committee, this evening, city staff is requesting council approval for the final items listed in the FY 2012 Capital Equipment Purchase Program. We reviewed these with you at your December 6th Public Works and Finance Committee meeting. As we have done for many years, followed our required bidding process. We posted on the city's webpage, we put it in the Lake Forester and the New Sun. We invite bidders as well. There are a handful of items on this evening's request. The other items you approved at meetings before this. The items, two of them are for our Parks and Forestry section that are with the state bid. They're two Toro pieces. The remaining items are two vehicles, a one-ton dump truck and a pickup truck for our water and sewer section. The challenge came to us when we only received one bid for the pickup and the chassis of the dump truck, the small dump truck. We went ahead and contacted the dealers, and the responses we received were, number one, there were a lot of bids out at the time. Number two, the dealers, if there's a trade involved, which there is on both of these bids, the dealers, their rule is they need to come look at the trade, and if they do not look at the trade, they do not submit a bid. I suggested if they could at least give us a Kelly Blue Book, and they said no, they physically need to see it. Looking back at our records over the past 4 years, when we've requested city council approval on items such as these, ironically, we've only had 2 or 3 bidders tops. Bigger, Chevrolet, and Hoskins were the other two out of Elk Grove and Wheeling. So it's not surprising to me that we've only received one bid. Shepherd Chevrolet has worked a lot with the city of Lake Forest. We purchased many vehicles from them. Majority of our pickup and car fleet are Chevrolet vehicles. Our mechanics are trained. We receive very good parts pricing and very good warranty service from them. So staff is recommending that we go with those that are included in your packet this evening. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer those. I know, a very exciting topic.
Michael, we talked a little bit about this. You know, given this trade-in issue that people need to come look at it, is it worth bidding these things with and without a trade-in?
We actually asked for a trade-in as an option, as an optional price. And as evident with these bids, we actually received better pricing, or excuse me, better bids from people from the outside wanting to purchase the city's used vehicles. So I understand what you're saying. If we bid it with no trade-in, will we receive more bids? Potentially. But the other side is that we did at least receive some very good bids from the outside, double if not triple.
We used to, at the toll line, I'm sure they still do it, we used to have auctions,
Correct.
so you
Correct.
could always probably drive your stuff over there and cut a deal with them.
We do, and there are auctions twice a year. We compare our numbers that the city receives
If
when
it's right.
on instances with this compared to those results, those auction results. Our numbers are always the same, if not higher. On top of that, we don't pay the 10% fee, and we don't have the manpower to transport them down to Winnetka or Arlington Heights. So,
Answers that too.
Any other comments on the equipment,
No.
trucks? Thank you, Michael.
okay, thank
See you
you.
in a little bit. Any other items
No, I
on the
think we're,
finance agenda?
I think we covered what we can cover.
Okay.
Contracting, isn't
What was that?
it? Phone, the cellular contract.
Do you want to take the cellular contract, or should we adjourn and,
Well, Alderman Moore had a question about, it. We might
I know,
wanna-
but
Well, just one question.
We might wanna,
we got a large
might as
crowd,
well
we got a
try.
large crowd out there, so I'm trying not to run into the,
right.
Good evening. This evening, I will be asking the City Council to enter into a cellular cell phone contract with Sprint Nextel. Some background. The city has been working with Sprint Nextel for approximately 7 years. We've utilized the cell phones with them, and in October of 2010, our cell phone contract expired. City staff assembled a cell phone committee comprised of members of police, fire, office of the city manager, recreation, forestry, IT, and community development. Together, we collaboratively created an RFP that we released. We received 5 bids from Sprint Nextel, Verizon, T-Mobile, US Cellular, and AT&T. The committee met, and we decided to interview both Sprint Nextel in addition to Verizon. Reason being is that these two companies have a direct connect capability. AT&T and others are now trying to utilize a third-party application for a phone. We know with Sprint Nextel and Verizon, we know the coverage, we know the service area, and we know the product. Following the interviews, we were even able to test a few of the phones. After we tested the phones for approximately 2 weeks, the committee decided to unanimously continue working with Sprint Nextel. We've had a 7-year strong relationship with them. We know their phones are a good product. We know that the Direct Connect itself is outstanding. For budget and fiscal impact, the proposal from Sprint Nextel, the monthly reoccurring charge was approximately a little over $5,000 a month. So what city staff did to calculate a yearly average is we added a 20% increase to that yearly total. and 13% of that was taxes, and we did another 7% for equipment. So approximately, we will be spending approximately $72,000 on phones. Please note that that could increase or decrease depending on whether or not we have any cell phone modifications to the plan. Currently, for each of the funding sources, they're all budgeted through each of the departments. Currently, we have budgeted a little over $100,000, but we're only requesting a little over $72,000. If appropriate, we would ask that the City Council desire to authorize the city manager into a cell phone service contract, subject to the final review and approval from the city attorney and the city manager on the contract. Do you have any questions that I can answer for you?
Yeah. By eliminating the other telephone companies, you use second party for the push-to-talk things. What is the premium that we pay for push-to-talk as a community?
Right now,
What
because
would be
of
the lowest bid without it, I guess, is what I'm saying.
lowest bid without it, it was probably a little less than $5,000 a month without
Very-
it.
Very close.
Very close.
Okay, thank you.
Karina, how many users are you talking about?
We have approximately 230 phones. We have 62 BlackBerry users and 183, 189 standard phones.
Okay, thank you.
Karina, quick question. Does the city have a policy on personal use of city phones?
We do. As a matter of fact, all city staff sign off on a policy indicating that they will not utilize the phone for personal use. Unless it's an emergency, we'll allow them to use it one time or so. However, if they do decide that they were going to use it for personal, the city would allocate money out of their paycheck in order to pay for that gap.
Terrific, thanks.
And clarification, aldermen don't get phones?
That's true. We don't want them, they're too accessible.
Or computers, or travel expenses, or
Anything.
Or anything. Or anything.
Water, we get water.
we get water.
Any other items? We should get moving. Before I ask for adjournment, I will say this will be my last Finance Committee meeting as chair, so I will bid you all farewell from the Finance Committee. I will obviously have a few more comments at the final council meeting in a few weeks, but I did obviously want to thank finance staff in particular for all their hard work. I've been chairing this now for 5 years. They have been terrific to work with. Kathy will get some more comments from me, but certainly Louise and Diane, I don't know if you will be here for the last meeting, but I am grateful for all your efforts and everything you've done for the city. You've certainly made my job a lot easier, so thank you. And with that, I will call a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
All right.
We're adjourned. Council meeting in 5 minutes.